Hi everyone, and good to see all of you in today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I am broadcasting to you from Budapest, Hungary, Europe in today's live IELTS stream. Today we're going to be looking at an IELTS reading passage from our materials, analyzing that passage for how commas are used, following a lesson on how to use commas. Today is September the 27th, 2018, and as usual, our materials are coming from our websites at aehelp.com for academic IELTS. I'll put that up here so you can check it out anytime during the stream. And for general IELTS, please make sure to visit us at gieltshelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com, where we have lots and lots of videos, materials, interactive lessons, 6 original practice exams to really help you improve your band score. Spend a couple dollars, save yourself the stress of having to sit the IELTS exam again and that large expense of having to pay close to $300 US. Hi Naveen, hi Nguyen, hi Ayush, hi Secret Gentleman. What a name. All right. As well, look for our logo in your Google Play Store, iTunes. Check for Academic IELTS Help or AE Helps Academic IELTS on Amazon for our books. You can get lots more help with the app, also buying our books from Amazon to use in these live classes. Good to see so many people joining in. If you ever have questions about our products or about IELTS, feel free to send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com. It's my name at aehelp.com. And these live classes are according to Central European time. Today, we're doing this grammar lesson on comma usage. Tomorrow, we'll do a full task 2 example question. Then we'll do some speaking practice for Saturday and a members chat requested class on Sunday. For those of you who are members of our YouTube channel, thank you for supporting us. And of course, members get access to the full practice exams that we use in these classes and get to request special classes as well. All right. So a couple of days ago, we talked about the first 6 rules of comma use. If you missed that class, don't worry. That video is still available on our channel, so you can check there and learn those first 6 comma rules. There's basically 12 different rules for using commas in the English language. Now, these are kind of soft rules, so yes, they are strict rules in many ways, but there is some flexibility. Don't worry about that yet. Just worry about learning these 12 rules and making sure to understand them when you're reading and implement them in your writing, okay? I see a question there from Sunset. You're asking, how many times a year does IELTS exam take place? That's a good question, Sunset Swallow. I believe out of the 52 weeks of the year, there's 50 weeks that have IELTS exams, depending on where you are in the world. But I believe it's 50 out of 52 weeks of the year will have an IELTS exam. All right, so first, let me show you real quick. This is the passage that we're going to be looking at. We'll also try to get to the questions on this passage as well, so it'll be a little bit of reading exercise also for the IELTS. The topic or the title of this reading passage is Why Do Some People Have Red Hair? And as you can probably already see in this first paragraph, there are commas used throughout these paragraphs. So in this case, our goal will be to identify why the author is using some of these commas once we understand some more of these rules. Hi, Rahul. Good to see you in class. Hi, Jeffrey. Good to see you as well. All right, so first of all, let's have a look at some more of these comma rules, some examples so you can understand it. Of course, use it. All right, here we go. So rule number 7. Use a comma with coordinate adjectives. Okay, so these are adjectives that give coordinates to the nouns that you're using. So this is the only time, as it says here, it's kind of an interesting one, where you should separate your adjectives with a comma. The rule in English usually is when you're writing and using adjectives, you don't put a comma between adjectives that modify a noun. You don't break the flow of the sentence. So what I mean there is if you say, Adrian ate a big red apple, which was gifted by a student, then you don't need a comma between big and red. So you don't break the flow of the sentence here between these two adjectives to modify the noun apple. However, there is an exception to this rule where the comma will appear, and that's this case here, okay? So to identify, to figure out whether or not you should use a comma between your adjectives, okay, and adjectives aren't necessarily just one word, you should ask yourself these questions here, okay? So the question that you need to ask yourself, and you can check this in your writing, it's really important to review your writing and check this out, okay? These are not coordinating conjunctions, education, ACC, so it's not the for and nor yet but so. These are coordinate adjectives, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So when you're reviewing your writing, ask yourself these two questions. Does the sentence make sense if you insert between the adjectives? So can you put something between the adjectives, and does it make sense? So here is an example sentence. Commas are a fun and exciting type of punctuation. So you can see here that it's a fun and exciting type of punctuation, okay? Now, here's the check. So this is one way that you can write the sentence. And then here's the check. Does it still make sense if you rearrange the adjectives? So fun and exciting are the adjectives here. Does it make sense if you rearrange the sentence in another way? So if you write it like this, commas are an exciting and fun type of punctuation, then it still makes sense. So here, if I write it in this way, it's still clear in the English language. Now, this is a little bit higher level. It's not one of the first kinds of comma rules that you should worry about, but when you're going for band 8 or band 9 on the IELTS, then yes, you should be aiming to master the English language at this level, okay? So in this case, both of these sentences make sense, so passes this test of inserting words in between, and as a result, you can use a comma, okay? Now, when you use the English language enough, you will eventually, and you don't have to be a native speaker for this, but you will eventually, with lots of practice and use of the English language, even feel when there's this kind of coordinate adjective in your writing, okay? So here's the final example sentence here. Commas are a fun, exciting type of punctuation. So notice that here, opposite to my example of the big red apple, a comma comes between these two adjectives which modify the noun punctuation. So when I read this with the comma, it reads as commas are a fun, exciting type of punctuation. And there's a slight break here, that quarter-second break between these two adjectives, okay? You can kind of think about it like fun and exciting are a little bit awkward with each other. So the comma here gives a little bit of a break for the listener or the reader to understand that both of these are being used as an adjective. When you say Adrian ate a big red apple, big and red are much more brotherly or much more close to each other as adjectives, okay? So try to write an example sentence that has a similar use of comma. So here's your chance, viewers, students, members, to give this a shot. So think about an example sentence, doesn't have to be too complicated in this case, where you're modifying a noun with two adjectives that could have a word between them like and, okay, this coordinate type of adjective. And then try to think about it. You don't even have to write it down. You can just try to think about it in your head if it passes these rules of rearranging the sentence and still making sense. And then, of course, if it passes those tests that I just showed you, then you can go ahead and stick that comma in between the adjectives. So try one of these sentences and I'll let you know if you're on the right track. Now, believe me when I say this, that this type of comma use can be tricky even for someone like me who's very intimately familiar with the English language. So don't be shy, just do your best, okay? So Jignesh Shah says, Adrian has a pen, eraser, and pencil to write the exam. Jignesh, that's a list of nouns. It's not adjectives modifying a noun. So that's a very different case of comma use, okay? You're separating a list of nouns there. So think about adjectives. Think about something that modifies the noun in the sentence, okay? Yeah, there we go. Jeffrey says, my teacher, Adrian, is a witty, enthusiastic person. Very good example, Jeffrey. That absolutely passes both of those tests and would make sense in this case. So I'll write that one up while I'm waiting for some other examples as well. Okay, but that one would work. So Adrian is a witty, enthusiastic person. Okay. Sims is a very tall, beautiful girl. Millions production. Yeah, I'd have to think about that one. I probably myself wouldn't use a comma there. I would just say Sims is a very tall, beautiful girl. No comma break in that one. If you modified her with something that's aside from her appearance, so Millions production, that's a great example to poke at. Both tall and beautiful are adjectives for the appearance of the girl. But if you switched one of those out for her personality, like in this case, a fun or a generous, then the comma would make more sense. So she is a generous, beautiful girl, then I would probably separate it with the comma. And a good way to think there is if both of those adjectives are modifying the way that she looks, no comma. If one adjective modifies the way she looks, the other modifies the way she behaves, then I would stick that comma in there to allow that reader or listener to identify that difference in the adjective modifying girl. Okay, so that was pretty good. All right, let's move along here. That's one that we can really have fun with for a while. So let's make some headway and get to some of the other comma uses. So we use commas with dates and addresses. Okay. Now this one for IELTS would be important for the listening section as well. All right. So not necessarily in your answers, but in the questions, just recognizing how the questions are using those commas. And oftentimes students will ask me about this. So how do you use commas in dates and addresses in the English language? And they are important. Commas are very important in the English language. Just to give you an example, there was a very famous case of misused comma. It's called the $5 million comma, because Rogers, a huge mobile service provider, had a contract with a cable company in Canada. And the company realized that there was a comma mistake, and they were able to renegotiate the contract and win an extra $5 million because of one misplaced comma in the contract. So commas are not to be underestimated. If you want, I'm sure you can find that article online. Just search for something like the $5 million comma and you'll find it, okay? And I'm guessing that the lawyer who drew up that contract will probably have some difficulty finding work at that level in the future. Okay, so anyway, back to the focus here. Just wanted to emphasize the importance of comma use. Commas separate months from the year or days from the year. Here's a very classic example. This is a fairly simple one. You just need to kind of remember the format, okay? So the example is there have been no misplaced commas since April 23rd, 1934. So here we have month, day, year. When you have month, day, year, then you use a comma. Just think about it as year is the longest, it's always at the end. And then you have month and day here. If it goes like this, where month is longer than the day, so the day is kind of awkwardly placed, it's, let's say, out of sequence, then follow it with a comma. Okay, so month, day, comma, year. Now, if you have it in a different way, so for example, you don't have the day, then you don't need a comma. Or if it's in, let's say, the logical sequence of time span, day, month, year, then again, you do not include a comma. All right, so this is just a kind of a technical rule for commas. Addresses can be kind of similar with street numbers, street names, country locations. And so they're often separated by commas, or in most cases they are. And again, here, just focus on the dates, this technical rule. If the day is between the year and the month, comma, in this case, no comma. All right. So rolling along nicely. Hopefully everything is clear so far. Shabin Pirzada is asking, Adrian, sir, do commas go before end? Are you asking me, do commas go before the word and, like A-N-D? If yes, then yes, if the word and joins two complete sentences, okay? So if you're using and as a coordinating conjunction to join two full sentences, then there is a comma before that coordinating conjunction. Again, if you missed that last class on commas, Shabin, it's still up on the channel, so you can check it out anytime, all right? Okay, so here we're going to use explain usage of comma with titles. So again, a little bit more permission to use commas. If the title follows a name, so if you have a title coming after a name, then there is a comma that will separate it from the rest of the sentence. And I think one of you actually did that in your previous examples, which was kind of nice. Here's an example. So Don Blathers, a comma misuser, will rue the day he included that comma. Okay? So the title here is a comma misuser. It modifies this name, Don Blathers. You can kind of think about it similarly as an additive piece of information. So this title for this name is separated by these two commas, okay? And that is a common way to see comma used in writing, all right? So oftentimes students will write, Frank, my father is a generous man. Okay? So that's another simple example for this kind of rule with titles, okay? Try one of these, all right? Yes, Manisha, that's right. I did see you use the comma in this way in your homework, and that was correct, okay? Rahul says, Mr. Adrian, can I get your laptop? So you're following my name with a comma, but you don't have a title afterwards. So you don't need the comma in that case. You can just say, Mr. Adrian, can I get your laptop without a comma, Rahul? Mr. Adrian, comma, my teacher, comma, can I get your laptop? That would be a good example, Rahul, okay? So I'll use that correction instead. But good try. Again, always try, so don't be shy. That's how you learn. So, Mr. Adrian, my teacher, can I have your laptop? Sure, that would be good. You want to insert that title, okay? Then it makes sense. So, Good try there. All right. So that's a fairly simple one to keep in mind. Again, think about it as I'm giving some extra information here. That is the most common way. The rules of commas tend to get into more details when explaining these, but oftentimes you can kind of recognize that it's following a similar concept as one of the previous comma rules, okay? So Gurpreet, that's a good one. Adrian, my teacher, provides IELTS classes every day. And that's how we read it as well, of course, with those commas. So commas do actually get read as a short pause, okay? Anusha, my viewer, is just confused. Anusha, we're going through some rules for how to use commas in the English language, which will help you to understand reading passages and will also help you to improve your writing. So that's what we're focusing on in this class. Jeffrey says, Philip Philosophy, a famous architect, has numerous works in the capital city of Thailand. Good. Jeffrey, there would be an S on work there. In that unique example, you would use the plural form of the word work. It would be numerous works, okay? Because you're using it as a noun following numerous. So in that case, we would actually add an S, even though it's generally non-count, okay? All right, otherwise a very good example. Okay, so not many more left here. Using commas with numbers. This is one I think some students are curious about. Many of you know this. If you have long numbers, more than 4 digits, so sometimes you'll even see 1,000 written like this. It is a bit awkward. It's just better to write 1,000 as 1,000, like that, okay? But as soon as you start to get into numbers that are greater than 1,000, oftentimes, especially in writing, so when you're using the number not in a math equation, but in a piece of writing, in an essay, then we will separate it with a comma after 4 digits. So 10,000, if you're reading an essay, don't be surprised to find it with a comma in between, okay? Now, Amjad, that's a good example as well. My father, a 60-year-old man, retired last year. Yeah, 60 years old is okay that way as well. All right. So here you have 20,000 separated by that comma. Here you have this. This is incorrect. This is confusing because a lot of readers would actually read this as 99,000 and believe that this is a mistake of a decimal period. So you do definitely have to be careful not to separate out 2 digits. Okay. So if you're trying to write the number 990,000, or sorry, 9,900,000, then it would be correctly written as 9,900,000, okay? So just after the 3 digits. Only when there's 3 digits, then you would write it like that, 9,900,000, okay? I believe you could put a comma there. I have to double check that. I generally don't write numbers that long, but anyway, keep that in mind, all right? Okay, so numbers do use commas. It's not a strict rule, okay? With numbers, me personally, I tend to avoid commas. I just use a little bit of a space. So if I write 10,000, I'll write it like that and just leave a slight space between the numbers. I find that more convenient and generally easier for people, but often people will use commas, all right? Okay, here we go. Here's another interesting one. Everything clear so far? Seema says, give me $90,000. Seema, adding the word please could be a bit helpful, but yes, that's a good use of comma. Millions Production says, million, Millions Production, 10 million. Both of those are correct, Millions Production. So the 1 million, no. The first one's correct. The second one is wrong. I thought that was 10 million for a second. See why that comma can be confusing? So Millions Production, your first one, 1,000,000, is correct. 10, comma, 00, comma, 00 is incorrect. Very confusing. I actually saw that as 10 million for a second. My I inserted an extra 0. So yeah, you definitely have to be careful there. Okay. Jeffrey says accounting uses commas, and that's a good point to make for a lot of you who are into business. Absolutely, and as you know, Excel, so if you're working with spreadsheets, commas have some very important functions in those spreadsheets as well, okay? So, Anusha, we're uploading constantly to the channel, several times a week for sure, so good question, just keep checking back. All right. Let's take a look at rule number 11. Only 2 to go. Hang in there, ladies and gentlemen. Rule number 11, use a comma when a conjunctive adverb begins. Okay, focus on the word adverb here. So obviously we're modifying verbs in this case. Don't worry too much about these kinds of technical expressions. Just remember what's actually going on, okay? When a conjunctive adverb begins, interrupts, or concludes a sentence. This is very common. I see this very often in students' writing. I often see it incorrectly, so definitely pay attention to this one, okay? A lot of people use semicolons, and I know most IELTS students like to avoid semicolons. I'm not going to get into semicolon rules today. That's a whole nother bag of cookies. Maybe in a future class, I'll get into colons and semicolons. But for today, let's just keep our eye on comma use. However, for many, especially native English speakers who love to just insert these semicolons all over the place, this is an important rule to keep in mind, okay? I think the easiest way to understand this is just by looking at some examples, okay? Here's our first example. Bear with me and it will make sense. So it's made up of 2 sentences. The company is having serious trouble managing all of these misplaced commas. Further, comma, we can't seem to stop them from rolling in. Okay, so in this case, this conjunctive adverb begins the sentence. It's the word further here. And because it begins the sentence, we use the word comma. Another synonym for this would be that you can see often is in addition. Okay? These words are very, very good, these conjunctive adverbs, to give good flow to your task 1 and task 2 writing in IELTS. So I highly recommend practicing them and using them, and just making sure that you insert the comma into the right place, all right? So this is where that conjunctive adverb begins the sentence. Then have a look at the next example. She had always wanted to use a comma correctly, semicolon. Because of her obsession, though, she hadn't yet figured out how. So a lot of interesting punctuation going on here. But what we're really focusing on is this comma especially, okay? The word though in this case is that conjunctive adverb. It's inserted into the middle of this information to show opposition, although or though. Okay, so here it's a combination of cause and effect with opposition. It's a much more complex sentence. If you're going for IELTS Band 9, you definitely need to reach this level of authoring. So here, there's a comma before and after the conjunctive adverb to lead into this last phrase. All right? So the first one, it's in the beginning, followed by a comma. This one, inserted into the middle of a sentence, it's followed by a comma. Those breaks are very important. And then here, this is one I don't use so much, but some of my colleagues definitely like this style of writing. And this is where you have the conjunctive adverb at the end. And here it's preceded by a comma. Okay? So he knew that commas were coming. He never thought that his life was in jeopardy, comma, however. Okay? So showing opposition to what he thought. So again, you need them when it's used at the beginning of a sentence, the conjunctive adverb in the middle or at the end. These are very important commas. If they're not there, the sentence reads very awkward for a fluent English speaker, for a professional English user. And you definitely don't want to make that mistake. If you do make mistakes like this in your IELTS Task 1 or Task 2, then you will lose marks. Maybe some of you realized with this last example that in Task 1 for academic, when you're writing about graphs and charts and you use the word respectively, that's the conjunctive adverb I like to use at the end of a sentence in Task 1, then you definitely need that comma before, okay? So let me show you an example sentence with that. And while I write up this example, this classic Task 1 type of example sentence for graphs and charts, think about your own example, okay? Kasra, it has a lot to do with the meaning of the sentence. So Kasra's asking, how much does that have to do with the meaning of the sentence? It has a lot to do with it, okay? Here, I'll give you an example of how much it has to do with a sentence in a good Task 1 essay. So you can do something like this, where in Task 1, let's say that you're writing an essay response to 3 or 4 pie charts. Okay, so you might have a sentence like this in Task 1. The pie charts show people's favorite types of pizza, pasta, and bread, respectively. Okay, so the first comma that I'm using here in my example, let's say that you have 3 pie charts in Task 1. First pie chart shows some different kinds of pizza that people eat. The second pie chart shows different types of pasta that people eat. And the third pie chart shows different types of breads that people eat. And so what you're trying to say to your reader here, or what you're actually saying to your reader here, is that you're looking at 3 pie charts. The first one that you're looking at defines types of pizza people eat. The second one defines types of pasta that people eat. The third one, types of bread. And the order of the information is in this order. This word respectively tells me, as the reader, that this one is pizza, this one is pasta, and this one is bread. And it's not mixed around, okay? So the order is actually in this sequence. Now, as you can imagine, that's very useful English and very useful grammar when describing information in your line graphs and charts, okay? So here, the word respectively tells your reader that the sequence or the order is the same as what you listed, all right? Make sure to use that, okay? So give me some example sentences, students. Try to write a sentence using a conjunctive adverb. These are basically subordinating conjunctions, if you will. And make sure that you place the comma in the right place. Challenge yourself. If you know how to use it this way or at the beginning of the sentence, try to write an example where you're in the middle of the sentence with that conjunctive adverb, okay? Millions Production says, the income of urban and rural people increased 30 and 40% respectively from the past year. Millions Production, almost, okay? Almost, you're very close. You have one missing comma because you're using respectively in the middle of your sentence. You need to put another comma after that Y, okay? So in that case, your sentence should read as this. Okay, I'll try to catch it before it. The income of urban and rural people increased 30 and 40%. You should have that other one in there, respectively, from last year. Okay, a good example. It's a very good example. It's another classic example of a task 1 where you have that conjunctive adverb, and you need commas on both sides of the word respectively because you're not finishing the sentence here. You're continuing with from last year. So this sentence that Millions Production put up tells me that urban people's income increased. Let me use my marker here. So urban people's income increased 30% and rural people's income increased 40%. The word respectively tells me that. And these two commas emphasize for me this conjunctive adverb. Okay? Very good. Good example, Millions Production. Just remember that second comma when it's in the middle. Okay? Roshni Kunte. Good example. The increase in oil production in 2020, 2021, and 2013, respectively. But what? So, Rushni, I don't know what is happening there respectively. The increase in the oil production in 2020, 2021, and 2013 decreased 10%, 15%, and 20% respectively. So I think you have some missing information in there, Rushni, because I'm not sure what's happening in this case respectively, okay? So I need that piece of information. Jeffrey says, the technology has progressed greatly. However, still no one knows how Nazca Line in Peru was created. That's good. Absolutely. Jeffrey, that's a good example. The technology has progressed greatly. However, still no one knows. Careful with that missing S again. No one knows how the Nazca Line, it's unique, the Nazca Line in Peru was created. Okay? All right. Good job. One more. Anushir, the population of the state increased by 2%. However, the death rate also increased by 1%. It's not called a death rate, Anusha. You're using the commas well. You're using however well. It's not called the death percentage. It's called the mortality rate. Mortality, okay? Mortality is the correct word there. All right. So, let me put that up there for you. So if you're talking about death, we do sometimes say death rate, birth rate, but it's usually birth rate and mortality rate. Okay? It's a little bit of a better way to express that. All right, and here is the last one for comma rules, and then we'll look at that reading passage. So, another time that we use commas, this is the last rule that we're looking at today. These are the 12 most common, most basic rules of comma use. 6 that we discussed in this class, the other 6 that I talked about 2 classes ago. You will find more. So if you go online, you keep searching, you'll realize that there are more rules to commas. Gets very technical. But definitely pay attention to these. This is the using a comma with an A-positive adjective, okay? So here's another pass, an A-positive adjective or an adjective that emphasizes the description of a noun or pronoun, and it's placed after the noun or pronoun. So when you have an adjective that describes that noun, but it comes after the noun, then it's offset by commas, okay? So the example here itself is the commas, comma, correctly placed and happy, comma, finally found their home. One way that you can think about this is you can actually place the adjective beforehand, all right? So you can see that you can take this piece of information, correctly placed and happy, take the actual noun, and you can throw it in after the adjectives here, the A-positive adjectives. So you can say correctly placed and happy, commas, finally found their home. But the author in this case decided to stick the subject right at the very beginning, the noun of the sentence, to emphasize it, to put focus on the commas. And again, this is kind of like what I usually say is the additive information. So you're adding definition, you're adding information to a previous noun or pronoun. It has to have the commas on the two sides, okay? So similar to a couple of those previous rules, one that we looked at today with the titles. So here the commas, comma, correctly placed and happy, comma, finally found their home. Now, here the instructions say that apositive adjectives are mostly used for aesthetic purposes. Aesthetic means beauty, okay? So to make it more beautiful, to make your writing more beautiful. When you're going for those high band scores in IELTS, like band 7, 8, 9, you don't just have to have good writing, you do kind of have to have what's called beautiful writing. It's a very subjective, abstract way to define this, but there is beauty in speech. Speech is not just technical, it is also aesthetic. It's an art form. Writing is an art form, as all of you know. Literature is an art form. So, just like a good painter, a good author has various tools that they can use to make their writing more beautiful. Punctuation and using commas is absolutely a powerful tool for good authors to make their writing more beautiful, as in this case. So, apositive adjectives, they're used for aesthetic purposes. You will often find them in fiction and casual writing. So for those students who are watching and you're doing general IELTS exam, your task 1, letter writing, where you're writing a letter to someone, I highly, highly recommend using commas in this style. Okay, it will definitely help to improve your IELTS band score. So when you're writing a letter to your friend or to your family members and you're explaining something about, let's say, for instance, a new city that you just moved to. That's one of the classic Task 1 examples for General IELTS. Write a letter to a friend or family member describing a new city that you just moved to. So in that context, absolutely a good idea to apply comma usage in this way, okay? Shabin's already throwing an example out there for us. So Shabin says, at my favorite barbecue restaurant, the meat is beef breast, lean and tender. The beans are cooked with patience, and the iced tea is blissfully cold. You don't need those semicolons there, Shabin, and you're using the commas in a little bit different context than what I'm describing here. Try to think of a couple examples here, especially general IELTS students. Try to think about somewhere where you could use this in a letter. So, the city, vibrant and full of life, is an amazing place to explore on the weekends. Okay. Let me simplify that a little bit. So that would be a nice way to add some description to describing a city that you just moved to. For instance, in your Task 1 General IELTS letter to your friend. The city, vibrant and lively, is an amazing place to explore on the weekends. Okay, so try that out, students. Shanu says, diamonds, heart-shaped, is loved by all women. Yes, it would be a little bit different though. That would appear like this. Shanu, I'll let you know. So diamonds, heart-shaped. Heart-shaped, because it defines the shape of the diamond, would be joined into a single word with a dash. So heart-shaped would be one together. Heart-shaped and brilliant are loved by all women. So that's enhancing that example a little bit, Shanu, okay? So that would be a better way to write that. Heart shape, remember, join that into one word because it's a one-word adjective. And then maybe add another word like this. So diamonds, S would be a little bit better there. Diamonds, heart-shaped and brilliant, are loved by all women, okay? All right, so that is the final example or final case of comma use there. Again, these 6 today, very important to know as well. Very important to use. Using commas correctly will enhance your writing, will enhance your IELTS band scores. If you missed the first 6 rules for using commas, definitely go back and visit that video from a couple days ago, okay? Here's a little conclusion that I'd like to go through with you. So although we often hear about run-on sentences, students, there's 2 kind of big mistakes in writing that can happen. It's common among young learners of English or among international learners of English and even a lot of native speakers who are adults. One is run-on sentences. Run-on sentences is where you have a lot of information in one sentence, so you're joining together a lot of different ideas, and they should be separated by commas and periods. Run-on sentences are bad. If you have run-on sentences in your essay in Task 1 and Task 2, you will lose marks, you will lose band scores. So make sure you don't have run-on sentences. Anybody know what the opposite of run-on sentences are in the English language? So run-on sentences are when you have too many ideas, too many words in one sentence that should be separated into multiple sentences or should be rewritten as complex sentences with commas and semicolons. What's the opposite? So what if I write something like ran a mile today? Okay, so let's say that I write a sentence like that. Ran a mile today, that's an improper sentence. That's incorrect in the English sentence, or in the English language, sorry. And that is called, according to Pachu and the English language, fragments. They're called sentence fragments. That's right. So do remember that you need to learn how to use commas, and you must not have run-on sentences, and you must not have sentence fragments in your writing. You will lose marks, and you will lose them quickly because they are awkward, they impede comprehension, so you will drop marks fast. So make sure you do not have run-on sentences or sentence fragments in your Task 1 and 2 IELTS essays. Okay, so very, very important to pay attention to that. Otherwise, you will lose marks. All right? Okay, so having said that, I'll spend a little bit more time with you here today just to see how well you picked up some of this information. Now, mastering comma use happens in 2 ways. One, read. When you're reading, pay attention to commas. Make sure you realize why that comma is where it is. If you don't, so let's say you're reading an IELTS passage or you're reading your book at home that you're using to improve your comprehension and reading fluency, and you see a comma and you don't know why it's there, circle it. When you see your teacher or when you see someone who has some good English, then show them and say, hey, look, can I ask you a quick question? There's this comma here and it's just bothering me. I don't know why the author is using it here. Can you tell me? It's important to know that, all right? So a couple of last points here before we look at the reading. There are correct ways of using commas. There are incorrect ways. Sometimes whether or not you use a comma is subjective. It's up to the choice of the author. 2 points that are important to remember. Even if you're using commas correctly, don't overuse them, okay? You don't want to break your fluency too much. It becomes awkward. So even when using commas correctly, be sure not to overuse them. Okay, I've seen that before too, where students write an essay, they're using commas well, but they have way too many commas, and it's just and it's very awkward to read because there's all these quarter-second pauses throughout the essay. So there's kind of a happy balance of using commas, and you will start to feel that and learn that the more you write, okay? So you will get the hang of that. So don't overuse them. It becomes awkward, even if they're correct. So when you're using commas, do not overuse them. Do not underuse them. Okay? You'll get the hang of that as you go along. Just don't be shy. Don't be stressed out. Use them, okay? All right. So let's take a quick peek at this passage here. Just read with me a little bit. Let's focus on understanding what we're reading, but also focus on how these commas are being used by this author. So, why do some people have red hair? Let's read this first paragraph together, nice and loud. Let me have a drink of water first. I'm going a mile a minute today. My mouth has gotten dry. Just bear with me. That's right, Kesra. The overuse of commas interrupts the flow of reading, and even if used correctly, the reading starts to lose its overall quality. So here we go. Red hair is an exceedingly rare trait, especially in areas of the world such as Asia, Africa, and South America. In Western Europe, however, red hair is relatively common. In some countries, such as Scotland, red hair is more common than blonde hair. Additionally, countries with historical immigration from Western Europe, such as the United States and Canada, also show high incidences of red hair. Red hair has been around for thousands of years, if not far longer. There are ancient Greek accounts of redheads and even ancient Egyptian ones. The story of why people have red hair is interesting and has to do with genetics, evolution, and geography. All right, so lots of commas in this first paragraph. Let's see if you can tell me why they're there. So let's have a look at the first couple. Red hair is an exceedingly rare trait, especially in areas of the world such as Asia, Africa, and South America. Why is this first comma there? Can anybody tell me from those 12 rules that we looked at? If you're not sure, but you have an idea, just guess. Take your best shot. Don't be shy, okay? So why do we have this first comma here? Okay, trait, especially in areas of the world such as Asia, Africa, and South America. Jeffrey, I think you're jumping ahead of the game. It's not a list here. Me Too says it's an example, so this is giving me a further definition of this. Yeah, it could be that. Tricky question, that one. Sorry about that, girls and guys. That was a little bit of a a trick question. Here, this comma is a choice of the author. The author feels it's important for the reader to take a break here because they're emphasizing this part of the sentence. We haven't talked about this one yet, but I'll tell you something. If I were to write this, I wouldn't put a comma there. I'd take that one out. Okay, so I'd actually write that without a comma. I'd say red hair is an exceedingly rare trait, especially in areas of the world such as. So I would not include a break. That's just my style, my diction. So that's just a stylistic comma. Okay, that's a stylistic comma. You haven't learned about that one. That was a trick question, but it's not needed in my opinion. It's a choice of the author to put that in there to give emphasis to this half of the sentence. Now, a little bit of an easier question. This is the one I think Jeffrey answered. This comma and this comma. Why are they there? Because it's a list, okay? So one of the students already caught that. So Asia Africa, South America. That's a list of nouns. It's locations in this case. So that list is separated by commas. And again, this comma arguably is not needed. This one is definitely needed, okay? So again, with all the rules that I've showed you, you'll still realize that sometimes there are commas in places where maybe they're not needed there, okay? So yeah, there you go. Urvashi Bazvana just asked me, do we need that comma after Africa? No, arguably not. And a lot of English teachers will say, hey, let's take that comma out. You don't need to break that sentence there. All right, let's keep going here. In Western Europe, however, red hair is relatively common. So here we have a comma here and here. Why? And you just learned this. So in this sentence, in Western Europe, however, red hair is relatively common. Why are those two commas there? It's not to highlight the noun in that case. Jignesh says, well, it's because the word however. That's right, Naveen. That's the technical term. It's a conjunctive, not conjective, conjunctive, U-N-C-T-I-V-E. So it's a conjunctive adverb. Absolutely. So you have the word however here. However is being put into the middle of this sentence to show opposition at this point. And because of that, it requires the comma on both sides. Absolutely. So that's a conjunctive adverb in the middle of the sentence. Okay? Very good. Good for you for recognizing that. All right. Here we go. In some countries, such as Scotland, red hair is more common than blonde hair. Why do we have these commas? Okay, a lot of commas. So obviously this author is partial to commas. They like them a lot. Why are they here? Why are these two commas here, such as Scotland? And again, don't be shy. Just guess if you're not sure. Throw it out there. Naveen says, this author, I think, is a comma freak. I actually know who the author is. Obviously, we work together. And yes, he definitely likes his commas. He's quite good at using them. We often disagree on comma use, but hey, that's where there's a difference of opinion, okay? Me Too says, what's additional information? So the author is giving additive information here, or a further description for the word some countries, such as Scotland. And yeah, absolutely. It's an example. It's additional information being inserted into the middle of the sentence. You could just take it out. It still makes sense. So you could say, in some countries, red hair is more common than blonde hair. That's how you know, because even with this omission, it's still a good sentence. So it will take that comma on both sides. Very good. Here we go. Additionally, countries with historical immigration from Western Europe, such as the United States and Canada, also show high incidences of red hair. So we have few more commas in this sentence. We have a first one there, and then we have the second one here. These two, this one and this one, same as this one here. So we're adding information. What about this first one? So this comma here. Why is that coming in? So additionally, countries with historical immigration from Western Europe. It's an introductory word, Jeffrey, but again, there's a more technical way to say this. Additionally, as Jignesh is saying, is a conjunctive adverb that's beginning the sentence. That's right, it's like furthermore, okay? So it's absolutely like further or furthermore or therefore. So it's a conjunctive adverb. You can see that it's a very common appearance of the comma, and these are used a lot. So learn to use these. Your band score will improve. Okay, let's finish up this paragraph. So red hair has been around for thousands of years, comma, if not far longer. Why is this comma here? If not far longer. Can anybody tell me that? Getting into some trickier comma usage. So why is there a comma with the if not far longer? Red hair has been around for thousands of years, if not far longer. Very good, Sunset Swallow. Good for you. Okay. Very, very good. Again, this comma is simply an artistic style, so it's a stylistic comma that's emphasizing the second half of the sentence. Is it needed? No, it's not. Why not? So why could I, if let's say I'm writing this and not my colleague, I would probably just take that comma out. Why? Can anybody tell me why I would not include that comma? So why would I omit that? What is that sentence? It's a complex sentence. And the good question you should be asking here is, what is the order of this complex sentence? So why is that comma not needed in this sentence necessarily? And this is where you should be thinking back to your subordinating conjunctions in your complex sentences. I can write this sentence another way. So I could say, if not far longer, red hair has been around for thousands of years. If I write it like that, then I would definitely need the comma, right? So, yeah, there we go. Sunset Swallow says, well, the sentence, it's the order. Oh, you're kind of on the right path there, Sunset. So I could say it like this. If not far longer, redheads have been around for thousands of years. In this case, a redheadedness is a little bit more clear. Okay, so in this case, let me erase all that extra scribble. In this case, I have to have the comma. So here, I must have the comma. But in the passage, these two are around the other way. So I don't need that second comma. I don't need to break the sentence. And now I think a lot of you are realizing what's going on here. So this is the dependent clause. This is the independent clause. When the dependent clause is before the independent clause, you need that comma. If you switch it around, you don't need it. So the only time that you want to put it in there is when you emphasize that second piece of information, and it's less common. Okay, it's less common to see it that way. So good for those of you who realize that, hey, wait a second. In this case, we don't need that second comma here because this is the dependent clause and the independent clause is first. Okay? All right, let's finish this up. There are ancient Greek accounts of red-headedness and even ancient Egyptian ones. Why is there a comma here? This is a good question. So I know I'm moving along here a mile a minute, but let me read it one more time. There are ancient Greek accounts of red-headedness and even ancient Egyptian ones. Why did the author choose to put a comma in here? Okay, again, it's a little bit stylistic. It's not absolutely necessary. But in some sense, the author is joining two sentence elements here. Okay, I'm wondering if anybody caught that. So you could read this as, there are ancient Greek accounts of red-headedness, and there are even ancient Egyptian ones. Okay, again, it's the emphasis. So notice that emphasis is an important part of comma usage. Here, the there are modifies this part of the sentence. Okay, and it modifies this one as well. So you could put this in here. And rather than the author putting it in there again, they've put the comma here and emphasized it without putting in the there are. Okay. Jignesh says, but it isn't necessary. And Jignesh, I absolutely agree with you. I would take out that comma also. Okay. Now, let's finish this up and I'll show you one interesting thing for today. Okay. So the story of why people have red hair is interesting and has to do with genetics, evolution, and geography. So here, same thing. There's a missing it. So it could be seen as joining two sentences. And then here, it's a list. We don't need that one, okay, necessarily. Now, I'm going to read this paragraph for you as the author wrote it with all of the stylistic commas. And then what I'll do is I'll take out the stylistic commas and read it without the stylistic commas. So you get a feeling of how commas change the meaning of writing and how it impacts the way that people read, okay? So first, I'm going to read it with all the commas. Just listen carefully and notice the way that I pause during the reading. So, red hair is an exceedingly rare trait, especially in areas of the world such as Asia, Africa, and South America. In Western Europe, however, red hair is relatively common. In some countries, such as Scotland, red hair is more common than blonde hair. Additionally, countries with historical immigration from Western Europe, such as the United States and Canada, also show high incidences of red hair. Red hair has been around for thousands of years, if not far longer. There are ancient Greek accounts of redheads, and even ancient Egyptian ones. The story of why people have red hair is interesting, and has to do with genetics, evolution, and geography. Okay, so that's reading it with all the commas in place. Now, I'll go through this quickly, take out the stylistic commas, and I'll read it for you again, okay? So, okay, I believe I've X'd out all of the stylistic commas. So notice that in this one paragraph, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In my preference, in my aesthetic style of writing, I don't like to have that many different stylistic commas. I might have 1 or 2, but definitely not 5 or 6 in such a short amount of time. Now, listen again, and I'll read this one more time with all of the stylistic commas removed, okay? So, red hair is an exceedingly rare trait, especially in areas of the world such as Asia, Africa, and South America. In Western Europe, however, red hair is relatively common. In some countries, such as Scotland, red hair is more common than blonde hair. Additionally, countries with historical immigration from Western Europe, such as the United States and Canada, also show high incidences of red hair. Red hair has been around for thousands of years, if not far longer. There are ancient Greek accounts of redheads and even ancient Egyptian ones. The story of why people have red hair is interesting and has to do with genetics, evolution, and geography. All right, so now you've heard it both ways. So you've heard it read with the stylistic commas and without, where commas are the absolute important ones, where they have to be there according to rules. And it's up to you, it's up to your decision to figure out which one you like more. However, make sure that you know what you like to do as far as stylistic writing goes. Sorry, I just had to take care of some chatter there in the chat. So make sure that you are very familiar for when you have to use commas, and be sure that when you're using commas when you don't have to use them, then you are using them purposefully and because it represents the style of your diction, so the way that you speak or the way that you write, okay? Hopefully that made sense. I took it to quite a high level there for the end of this class. But again, for those of you students who are looking for those band 8, band 9 scores, so those really high scores, you definitely should be looking at understanding comma usage at this level, okay? There you have it. That's it for today's class. If you have any questions, if you're not sure about some of this information, you can always send me a quick email, and I will certainly do my best to help you out. Again, comma usage can be a bit subjective. So make sure that you follow those 12 comma rules and use them in your task 1, task 2. Be able to identify them in your reading, okay? Again, materials coming from our websites, aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. We have lots and lots of information on both these websites about grammar usage, and you will be able to see these videos as well on the websites later on. They will be up on our YouTube channel for a few days. Then they will rest for the rest of their lives on our website, so you can check them out there. Thank you so much, students, for watching, for bearing with me. I know that learning about comma usage and punctuation is not the most exciting piece of information in the world, but definitely useful for those of you who are really pushing to get your writing to that highest level. So make sure to practice at home. Thanks again for watching. Much love to all of you. Bye for now. Have a great rest of your day. Sleep well if it's late in your country, and I'll catch you tomorrow for a task 2 lesson. Bye for now, everyone. Thank you, members, for your support. Bye, Naveen. Bye, Shanu. Bye, Jeffrey.